Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm here with something a little different, something I haven't covered in a little while. One of my painting advice videos. So I do a lot of miniature painting. It's my way to relax in the evening. When I get done, I'll sit back and I'll just work on whatever I've got going on, whether it's core space or some firefight or dead zone. Doesn't matter, whatever I'm working on at the time. And I've been trying lots of different techniques over a period of time to try to improve my skills. Because the way my hands shake, I'm never going to be, a perfect painter. And I kind of think a lot of people fall in that category. There's so many excellent miniature painters online who just do phenomenal work. I'm subscribed to a handful of them. I'm sure if you're into miniature painting, you are as well. And I'll watch them do something online and I think, okay, that looks relatively easy. I can try that. And no, I'm not even close. So I found a technique that works for me to get me at least something that looks good on the table. It's not perfect. It's not excellent. It's not going to win a golden demon or anything, but something I'm proud enough to put on the table, put in front of the camera, and I'm not upset about it. So what I'm talking about is what you can kind of see laid out in front of you here. And it's zenithal highlighting, but not really zenithal highlighting, okay? So what I mean by that, and I'll throw a picture up in the corner, is when you do zenithal highlighting, what you'll do is you'll take and pick a mini, and you'll pick a direction you want the light to come in from. So you'll prime it in black, all black, and then whether the light's coming from straight above or if it's coming in from a side, and then you'll highlight in that direction, okay? So it'll be the brightest, the lightest colors wherever the light's supposed to come from. That way it gives you kind of a base that allows the paint to be brighter on areas where it's supposed to be brighter and, darker obviously in places it's supposed to be darker. For me, I found that stereotypical zenithal highlighting did not work well. It did okay, but it left so much of the miniature dark for me, because if we look at this one as an example, if I had it coming from straight above or at one of the shoulder pads here, everything else would be dark, right? All of it down through here would be just completely dark. And it didn't really give me a good effect. And I don't think I was quite good enough to really pull off zenithal highlighting the way it was supposed to be done. So I kept poking around. I kept looking at other videos and what people were working on. And I found a technique that's very similar to zenithal highlighting, but it's easier for me to pull off and it gives me an overall effect on the mini. And it's the same that I've done for all of these. I've got a whole bunch basically primed up and ready to go when I get around to painting them. So we'll use this one as an example here. You guys can see there, you see there's still a good amount of black, but the highlighting that I've done is already done all over the mini. So what I do is I dry brush it twice. I will dry brush it once with a darker gray, and then dry brush one more time with a lighter gray that I do basically just hitting the highlights. So as an example, the colors I'm using, I'll use something like this, okay? I'll have uniform gray as the first prime I do, and I hit that almost all over. It takes care of the majority of the black, but it still leaves a good amount of black in certain places, especially underneath. If it's the bottom of a mini, I will try to make sure and leave that as dark as possible. Like you see this one underneath that hat, which I originally thought was a head, robot head, but it's not. It's pretty well black because you would not expect to have a whole lot of color there. But the top is very highlighted, especially where the details are. This one's a good example. You can see how if I'm holding up directly from the bottom, you can see a lot of black, but there's still some prime there. Right? It's still pretty well good to go. There's a lot more on the top than there is on the bottom. So you're still getting that zenithal effect, but you're not getting it just in one direction. So like I was saying, you'll hit it with the darker gray over the black, and you'll do that at relatively heavy. And then you'll come back with some softer gray. Doesn't really matter. You can even use white if you want to, but white has a more dramatic effect. I found that dark gray and a lighter gray works a little bit better, and it's whatever grays you want to use, right? As long as it's similar color, and you can kind of adjust around based on the mini you're going to be doing and whatever the final color is going to be to give yourself a little bit of a swing. It's a little bit more advanced technique than I pull off, but it'll work. And what I found that this does for me is that I get minis that are basically highlighted already, and it works very, very well with contrast or speed paints or transparent paints. These work okay. They're from Monument. They have a little bit too much pigment to pull it off depending on the color. Something like a blue, it's so dark. Yes, it's a little transparent, but it's not as transparent as something like a traditional contrast paint or one of the speed paints that you'll use from Army Painter, which I'm going to do a separate video talking about these, so you guys stay tuned for that. So if you stick to those, especially contrast speed paints, the Vallejo's coming out with their own line. I forget exactly what they call them, extra paints or something like that. Express paints, maybe that's what it was. But regardless, they're transparent enough that the color that you're putting across this still stands out. So it's naturally darker where the black is. It's naturally lighter where the highlights are. So as you guys can see here, here's some that I've done from the 148 Tactics. And all these were done, all that was done to them was a dry brush, just like this, and then contrast paints. That's it. Especially thought, if I can get enough light on top of these. See the helmet? Literally, it was just dry brushing. I would never be able to get those lines on his helmet to stand out. There we go. I adjusted my light a little bit to make it stand out a little bit better. But you can see how the helmet actually stands out where all those little segmented parts are. And it looks really good, especially things like the backpack, those little pouches back there, all look really good. And it looks like someone who knew what the hell they were doing actually painted the damn thing. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just throwing shit on the model and hoping it sticks. But by doing this dry brush technique, you can see how the little folds and the uniform stand out. Now, the only parts that don't benefit from this are ones where you have to use like a regular paint. So here on his weapon, I used a regular paint, not this one, but something like this, right? So it's going to cover it up. You can still use these and have that effect, but you're going to have to water it down like a mofo to try to get it to work. And even still, I would stick with the contrast or the speed paints. It kind of works on the skin, but I found that still better to just use a regular skin paint. Go back and hit it with a wash and then highlight it up just a little bit again to get your effects. But overall, you can get minis like this done, especially, I mean, look how good that backpack looks. All it is one color of contrast or speed paints. I forget which one I used. I think it was the contrast, the leather from Citadel. But one layer of that over the dry brushing that I did. That's it. And you get this nice effect. And I would definitely hit it with a varnish after you're done. Here's an example using darker colors. This is the German from the same type of set, different set, but same one. And you can see how you get those effects. The edges are highlighted, right? They have those little marks that stand out for him. You can see that his uniform looks like it already has the highlighting done, the recesses standing out. And I didn't come back and highlight this. Not at all. All I did was that dry brush technique that I told you and hit it with one layer, usually one layer, depending on the color of the paint that you're using. You might have to use 2 layers to really get the color to stick, depending on how dark it is. If it's really black part of the model, do a couple of layers, but that's it. And then you get those nice effects and you don't have to put in a whole lot of work. You can have a handful of models spread out in front of you, take an evening, dry brush the shit out of all of them. You know, you prime them, dry brush them, and then do an assembly line type deal with whatever colors of the contrast speed paints that you need to use. And boom, right down the line, you can get a whole squad painted up in a day or two using this, and it's fully table ready and looks good without having to sit there and painstakingly go through and highlight all the little parts that you want to stand out on the uniform or the boots. Like, especially, I think those boots came out good. They have that nice leather effect. It is highlighted in spots that it should be highlighted in. And all I had to do was hit it with one thick layer of the contrast paints to be done with it. And especially that helmet too. Backpack, really everything I think worked pretty well. And this is for me. I know, like I said, I'm not going to be winning any Golden Demon, any painting awards. My stuff is just not that good, and it's never going to be that good. But it can look good. It can look really good on the table, and people can think that you spent a lot of time on the models that you really didn't spend a lot of time on the models. It's the formula of the paint and using a couple of little cheating effects before you get started. So if you want to try this, all you've got to do is whatever your model is, you'll get your dry brush, you'll have your whatever color you're doing, the darker, the lighter one, and just up and down the whole thing, even on the bottom, right? Even in those spots where you normally would not do zenithal highlighting, just avoid places where you know no light's going to go, like directly under this helmet here. But even down here in this region, a model's still going to have some effect to it. So I might hit that with that darker gray just to lighten it up a little bit so there's not as big of a contrast between the two different sections. Now, like I said, you can get some decent models out of it that look really good. This was painted with the same type of effect with the exception of the metallics for the chest plate, and the other pieces, those are just regular metallic paints. And ooh, his leg, I really love that. That came out really good. But same type of effect. All of these areas where you see the highlights there, that's all done just using the contrast paints and the pre-highlighting. And it comes out looking good without a severe amount of effort needed to be put in to get the model table ready. So anyway, if you're like me and you're not an excellent painter, you're an okay painter, but you're never going to be, super top level quality, you can get some good stuff. You can get it looking good and people going, wow, that's pretty decent, without having to really kill yourself trying to hit all those tiny little marks. Pre-dry brush it, hit it with those types of paints, call it a day. Right? Anything else like the skin, maybe some weapons you have to hit with the regular paints. And other than that, you're good. You can churn out a whole bunch in a quick succession. You guys stay tuned though. I do have some tests I'm going to be doing to show off some effects that we have with the Army Painter speed paints. I've got a couple of models just brushed down with a couple of colors. And we're going to do an experiment with these. I'm going to have that going on in the next few days. So you guys stay tuned for that one as well, because we might have some issues with the speed paints. We'll have to determine that after we do our little experiment with these guys. All right, that's going to be it for me. You guys take care. I'll catch you in the next.